genuinely no idea is insane enough that people won't back it. Because sometimes some of them ideas that are a little bit weird are quite often the best ones.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
My island influencer this week is a voice you may recognise, Sam Turton, a reporter at Gef The Mongoose. We talk from the best office he's ever been in about life growing up, including his education journey. We debate the highs and lows of journalism, politics and his pandemic burnout. Despite unintentionally returning to live on the Isle of Man, Sam shares why he likes living on the island and offers excellent advice on solving the challenges he believes the island is currently facing. I think Sam's LinkedIn profile sums him up. I write things for my own amusement and the enjoyment of strangers. So do listen to this week's amusing conversation with Sam Turton in episode 76 of Island Influencers. Sam, thanks so much for coming along to St John's on a really blustery day. It's autumn already, so...
No, not at all. I think this is the best office I've ever been in, so I quite like being out here.
Yeah, it's pretty special, isn't it? Yeah, so the thing about Island Influencers is people from all walks of life come and talk to us, and, you know, I've been wanting to hear your story for a while, because I think it's fair to say you came to prominence for many of us during COVID, particularly when you were one of the voices that we listened to on the radio, on the COVID station, and all your writing, which is blunt and brilliant. So thanks.
Yeah, no, same about voices. I remember when we had, because the first stage of the pandemic, we weren't really masking up. We were sort of like, oh, it's inconclusive, whatever. Then all of a sudden it was very conclusive.
Yes.
And I remember being in ShopRite one day, and the one behind there went, I recognise your voice from somewhere. And I'm like, oh no, that's reached a point I didn't think we'd reach, but there we go. Too much of me on the TV and the radio, but...
Yeah, well, what we normally do is, if it's okay, just let's hear your story, hear about how you ended up at Gef The Mongoose. It depends on your view. It's either Gef or Gef, but you call it Gef, so that's good enough for me.
I think it depends on how Manx you want to be at times. I mean, like I said, I've spoken to people from Culture Running who some will say it's Gef, some will say it's Gef, so if they're not happy to decide, I'm happy to stick with Gef because I can pronounce it slightly better. But, yeah, I suppose really I did the usual thing, went through school, did A-levels, 2013, no, what year did I finish school? 2013 I finished school.
God, you were so young.
And I probably didn't do as well as my A-levels as I should have done.
Why was that?
Well, at the time I blamed it on the government because we were involved in the tuition fees row with them. In reality, it was my approach to work, probably. At the time I was sort of not that interested in what I was doing. I suppose didn't take it that seriously, and I still got into university what to go to. I didn't get onto the course I wanted to go. I wanted to go into a politics course. I ended up on, I want to say it was like child social work or something like that. It was like the...
Gosh, okay. So you wanted to do politics and you ended up on child...
Yeah, and then I...
Child-related course, okay. Where was that?
That was at Nottingham Trent.
Great.
Trent Army. Fantastic uni. And I remember I got this results day, and regrettably, me and my mate agreed to open our results live on Manx Radio.
No way.
Which was not a good idea, because he got into Oxford, and I'm sat there going, what on earth is that course? So it was slightly mixed motions that way. But I spoke to one of my teachers at the time who said, just go, do 2 or 3 sessions, and then go see the careers advisor and go, I don't think this is going to work. So that's exactly what I did, and this is sort of thing, behind the ones at university who most people will never see. You do have these teams who are like brilliant, and I went to see this guy and I said, they gave me this thing through clearing, which is like nothing to do with my course, and it's not really what I do. And this guy, he was the dean of something, and his name was Dean, so he was called Dean. And he was just like, yeah, I hate when they do that. I don't understand why they've given you this sort of course. Clearly not for you. And he went, right, here's the courses that have got spaces, and one of them was this thing called Sociology and Politics.
Oh.
And so I was like, I can do that. And it was then I realised I had no idea what sociology was. But weirdly, a guy who lived like 3 doors down from me, he was on that course, and like freshers as you do, you get a chance to people who are around. Yeah. And I said to him about it, he said, oh, it's great. Went and spoke to the course leader. He was great, so I got all that sorted, and ended up doing sock poll, as we became known.
Right.
But we had like this, it was a really weird group, because we had like 35 on our course. They've actually stopped doing the course now because they didn't have enough people doing it. But it's like the team that led it were like really quite senior people in social research. So they did a thing about young people engaging in democracy, it won like this Times Higher Education Award. So you had like really senior people running this really quite small, close-knit course, which was really good because when there's a couple of hundred of you, you can easily get lost in the crowd. Whereas with this, our course was really good because you all sort of knew each other, but you also, because we had like really small seminars, they knew who we all were as well. So it was quite good, that.
Yeah. So did you learn lots?
Yeah, there's weird things that always stick in your head, isn't there? And one of them was always for me the Sociology of Turtles, which was this strange thing about how somewhere in South America had boosted its tourism by promoting on nature and its natural reserves, and then over the time that tourism has led to a downturn in the nature because all the tourists were killing them off. So it's like the sociology of what you want to achieve and what actually comes from that and how that affected the world around them.
Right.
So stuff like that has really been quite interesting. And then off the back of that, I got Desmond, the 2-2 for that one. So I'd applied to go onto a journalism course because I lived with a girl who'd done journalism for 2 years, and I thought this is great, really interesting. And it was around about the time when we were having elections and referendums and everything else, and I thought, I really want to do this. So I applied for that, didn't get on that course, ended up on international relations, which was my second or third choice. That's when I sort of realised that the master's course was very different to your sort of normal thing, because there was like 15 people on this course, mixture of people who were like, they'd been sent there for work to do it, so they're taking it really seriously. There's a few of us who sort of hung on from uni because we didn't want to get jobs, and that was all going on really. So that was really different sort of course.
So you did a master's in that?
Yeah, I did a master's in international relations, which was
fantastic.
Just been put to great use on a couple of occasions. But yeah.
And so what did you do to be, I mean, presumably you had to pay your way through to do a master's. Did your grant run out at that point? Or?
Yeah, my grant ran out at that point, and luckily my parents were in a position where they could support me through that. Because I had already signed on for a flat with a girl who's a really good friend of mine, and still is a really good friend of mine now, and we'd agreed to we're going to live in Nottingham for an extra year or whatever, work out what we're going to do, because she was like the year below us anyway, so we stuck around with that. And so it's a case of if they hadn't been in position to be able to afford that, I would have had to just go off and work for a year sort of thing.
Did you get a job anyway?
Yeah, weirdly I worked for Nottingham Forest as a bar supervisor.
Wow.
Which largely came back because I'd worked at McDonald's for years. I used to...
Oh, over here?
Yeah, I worked at McDonald's from when I was 16 through till basically after just when I left uni. But I did... I used to do like tills and stuff for them, and so I had to send them a CV, like I could cash tills out and hand them money and that sort of stuff. So it was sort of like within about 2 or 3 weeks I'm suddenly doing this different job. I'd gone into just serve pints, and all of a sudden I've got responsibility for tills and other people. I'm like, all right, well, it's a pay rise, so that's something. That was a fun job really, because it was like it was sort of, again, working behind the scenes of a footy club is just insane, because you don't realise how much goes into, you turn up, you watch 90 minutes, you go away again. And like we'd be there for a 3 o'clock kickoff, we'd be there from 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and it's like 3 hours of prep just for the sake of the 25 minutes to half an hour before the game and 15 minutes at half time, all just on that. And there was like 20 bars around the stadium, so it's like that is just sort of like you look at the small things that go into what is this big thing. I really like that. It was a really good job. It was a lot of fun. And
interaction with the public.
Yeah, again, it was just something I was used to, really. I've always, in one way or another, seemed to end up working in public roles or, public-facing roles and something. And, it was quite a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But, like I say, luckily my parents were in a position where they could support that, so they paid for my master's course, which we then did, and I got my results for that, actually, while I was in Vegas, which was weird. So...
Studying sociology on a field trip, maybe? No?
Well, it was... So for my sister's 21st, parents paid for like a family holiday to Vegas, and then the same thing was going to happen for mine, but then I decided I didn't want to get a job. I wanted to do another year at uni, so we eventually went out to Vegas the summer after.
Right.
I was trying to work out time zones for when the things were getting released, because it's like, so they're getting released at 8 a.m. in the UK, what's that in Vegas, and trying to work that around. Then it turned out they were getting released like in the afternoon, and I was like, right, I don't know what time this is going to be released or anything now. So that was a weird day of trying to, like, sat around at the pool trying to work out when my results actually come out.
But they're not shut there, so it's fine.
And then I'm sat there going, what? So it come out as commendation, which I was like, oh, what on earth does that mean?
I think that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it was like, we're just shy. I got 69%, and a 70 was like the equivalent to a first, and I was like, oh, I could get that remarked. And then I sort of decided against that, because I thought, what do I do with a doctorate? So yeah, come back from that and was working at Barclays at the time. I'd left McDonald's and got into Barclays as part of FATCA.
Oh, great.
FATCA was one of them brilliant things.
Big yawn.
People spent years on FATCA and they just went away. No one cares about FATCA anymore, and we spent hours churning through tax information and surprising amounts about South African tax policy because of that job. But that was, to be fair, I only got that because my sister's friend Donna, she was really great, so she helped us get into that. I think there was a mutual understanding between me and Barclays that it wasn't really a job for me, which they were great to tell me about 2 weeks before Christmas. I wouldn't be coming back after Christmas, which I was on a short-term contract. That's how things play out.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And then I was reading the paper. There's a job there for a trainee journalist. I applied for that.
Right. So you had done journalism at in the past, hadn't you, at college?
Well, I wanted to. I'd been more involved with being interviewed by journalists. I'd been rejected from doing it at university, so I ended up with doing it. Yeah, applied, went in, entry level at the papers.
Great. So how long did that take before you found your feet?
Well, my first job, I started on the 2nd of January 2018, I think it would have been, which was the same day as the Iliam Doan Memorial down at Hango Hill.
Yeah. Sent you down to do that?
Yes. Chucking it down, blowing a gale.
Always is.
There's people speaking Manx. They told me to find a photographer, Mike Wade, who everyone on the island will know Mike anyway, but it's one of these things to go, find Mike, and I was like, what's he look like? He looks like Mike. I'm like, right, okay, good. So that was like interesting first day, and it just sort of went from there, really. I mean, when I first started, I couldn't write for toffee, because it went from this very academic sort of how you have to structure everything to completely different. And the people I worked for had the patience of saints because my writing was atrocious when I look back on it now. But yeah, no, that was I had 3 years doing that, really. Just over 2 quite normal years, and then the pandemic year.
Yeah. So why did you had this really high grade master's degree. What brought you back to the Isle of Man specifically?
I always joke and say it's misfortune, really, and bad timing, and it kind of was in a weird way. So the rent was running out, and our lease was running out in Nottingham. My friend who I was living with, her boyfriend had moved in with us for 7 months. She was pregnant, so they were going back to London. Didn't know really what to do next. Applied for a couple of things, the Foreign Office, and they were sort of like waiting. Oh, you'll get here something eventually. And at that point, and they're going, I've got like 5 days left on the lease here. Yeah. So I ended up coming back here, and been sort of floating around here ever since.
Yeah. So you're at the newspaper, and you've done Hango Hill. What happened? What happened then?
Well, like I say, did a lot of the what you term I don't want to phrase that, sort of a lot of the soft stuff when you come in. So you do coverage of, I was going to say the World Bonnet Championships, but they're a speciality. You can't go near them. Like community events that are on, and that sort of stuff, which is really helpful for learning how to craft your writing. Like I said, my writing was pretty bad when I first started. It wasn't a style which you could read in a news sense. And I worked with really close with Adrian Derbyshire, who was in journalism for 30-odd years. Yeah, he's
is he Shetland now?
Yeah, they're up in Shetland now, yeah. Because apparently the island wasn't cold and windy enough.
No.
So they went there. So he was the person who really helped it click with his thing. It was just like, imagine you telling someone a story as if you're in the pub and one of you's about to go buy a drink. So it's, have you heard this? And then the next bit, just put goes, you what? And then that's the context, and then the rest of it sort of flows from there when they sit back down again. And that really was what clicked in my head then about how to write, and it sort of went from there, really.
Yeah. I can see that. Right.
So
okay.
It's one of them things that sounds weird but makes sense if you sort of plot it out a little bit. And it just sort of went from there. And then bit by bit, I'd start doing more things like covering Tynwald, which was a really strong interest of mine. And that sort of carried on for 2 years, and I got more and more responsibility over things, do reports, do different things. And then, COVID suddenly appeared.
Yeah, and you were still at the papers, and then next thing, you're at Gef.
Well, yeah, it was a weird... Everyone has this thing about the first press conference they did for COVID and how weird it was. I don't actually have any recollection of it at all, because I was off on holiday for like that week. So I was off on holiday, and I sort of completely just cut myself off, and I wasn't paying attention to any of the news. And I was in the car, and I was like flicking through the radio, and I just said, I work with Jess, what's she on Max Radio for? And I was like, what is this? So I had to pull over and listen to it. I'm like, what on earth is this going on? And that's how I sort of and then the paper the next day is emergency measures. And I'm like, oh, this is a weird week to take off. So, so obviously from then it was pretty full on. A lot of people started working from home. Obviously there was 3 of us stayed in the office throughout the if we refer to that period as the height of the pandemic, because that sort of first 3 to 4 months as the arm was in lockdown, there was 3 of us who stayed in the office.
Who was that?
So that was me, Kathy Smith, and John Watson, sports editor. And a lot of that was more... there wasn't a sense of, like, we were all people who... we had almost like the least risk around us as people who could go in, but also it was a case of you had to have people there for things like photo diaries and pulling resources off the systems. I think that's what a lot of businesses found. No business was set up for what happened.
No,
no,
not really.
Even when my mum come home from the bank, they were suddenly like they couldn't do anything like a week until they could sort things. And you look at schools and the mess that was with laptops and everything. So there's a lot I think that people had to learn very quickly, and we did that really well with the papers, and it very quickly became a thing of how things changed to how we were working. So you would have all of a sudden, instead of these editorial meetings we were having 3 times a week, we'd have like every day on Zoom for at least 10 or 15 minutes. And that was, a completely different way of working, but it also meant that I was doing a lot of stuff that I hadn't done previously. So I ended up going into a lot of the things around these COVID breaches where people end up in court. I'd never really covered court before then. And then all of a sudden it became like every day you're in covering these things. And that was kind of a weird experience as well, because you got to a stage where the only people I was seeing on a daily basis were people I worked with, my parents, and the deputy bailiff. So you just sort of like, that's a weird experience.
Yeah, it was for many people, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of this weird thing as well. When I remember there was a day when there was something happened with somebody who was going to be in court, and the police said, can you come and see us before you go in? So, it was when they were conducting random checks on people, saying, where you going? A couple of those said, where you going? Police station. You're trying to be funny? I was like, no, I actually am. And that was sort of like that was another weird day. But yeah, the whole period was just so insane. But I think, there was this thing of where, and I spoke to all different people in different news organisations, we were all getting the same thing of every day you were getting like 20, 30, 40 messages, either personally or into the company saying, what's going to happen with this, what's going to happen with this, and that sort of built up to a point where you'd be there looking, if you started trying to read the emails in the morning, you wouldn't be done by the time you got to 4 o'clock. And you see, it was this really difficult thing of how the media were able to hold the government to account on this stuff, because at the time there wasn't a lot of appetite for people asking questions.
No.
That was reflected in Tynwald as well. There was a lot of members who felt quite disappointed in how that was handled, and we were struggling through this period of having to be sort of a very critical but very much a friend at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that largely the media did quite well.
I think there was a good balance from a punter's perspective, being at home, and it was reassuring to have, we're all in together. And,
well, it made a celebrity of Paul Moulton's, that's something.
Yeah. Yeah, it did.
But then from there, it was just sort of, that was constant. Yeah. And it really was constant. I know people think about, we had these Saturdays and Sundays where you could go for a walk for the dog or whatever, you could go walk around, and then you could come in at like 4 o'clock, Howard's on the radio or on YouTube or something. But for us, it was like, there wasn't so much a weekend rota anymore. We were all working every weekend. We were all working, and it was just this constant thing of, and then by the time we got to things opening up again, things had changed to people's own lives. So there's people that left, and there was Deputy Editor and Jackie and Adrian, they got married before COVID, and then they had a baby just towards the end of that period, so then they were off on maternity leave, and I'm just sat there like, gone from being trainee reporter to last person sat there going, we're going to get some more staff in. So I then sort of I did not manage this period very well, really. I just went into complete overdrive on just working constantly.
That's not good for anyone.
And then it got to, must be about November, December that year, and I was just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Because it was just a point of, I was completely mentally done in. So probably should have taken a holiday. But I happened to be on LinkedIn and saw this advert for Gef. And a really good mate of mine, Emma, who, come to Emma in a minute, but she was there by that point running Gef. She'd left the paper to go run that, and spoke to her briefly about what it was. Applied for that. Went in, spoke to her and Kate, and went from there, really.
Yeah.
So that was... And then
that was this new voice. It hadn't been that mainstream, I don't think, until you went there and started putting some articles out there that were,
I think,
pointed. And
I think the thing with Gef was it changed of what it was. So Gef during the pandemic captured I hate the phrase lightning in a bottle, but it really did. At the start of the pandemic, Gef captured this moment where people were sort of like, we're all in this together. And, they had the brilliant things of like the Howard o'clock wine, which was just brilliantly timed.
Was it gin o'clock?
I think they had the Howard O'Clock wine, and they actually had bottles of wine with Howard's face on them, which I thought was quite good. And they themselves, they hadn't really prepared for anything like that. They'd gone in as like a bit of a marketing agency, which does news, and it was all a bit quirky. And Gef was like this kind of almost like a side character to the news a lot of the time, which we all thought
too cool for that.
Yeah, we all read and thought was quite funny, and it was quite good, and it was really did something different to the Manx media scene. And then from that, they're suddenly covering the pandemic, and they had Amanda Cashmore come in as well, and she was brilliant during that period. And then it was sort of like, okay, so what next? And that was where I come in as news and journalism, really.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. It's grown the profile. I mean, I was looking at your Facebook page. It's 17,000 likes. And that's phenomenal for the Isle of Man, for a Facebook page, to have that many fans, if you like.
Well, that comes down to, Kate Egerty and Emma Mann-Cox. I'm never quite sure what surname I used to be Emma. Yeah. So she's Emma Mann, but she's married to Tim Cox, so I think it's Emma Mann-Cox. Well, anyway. But Kate Egerty and Emma Mann, they're like by far the two greatest people I've worked for. They're absolutely, really, just unbelievably creative, like little things that they can think of.
Yeah.
And they have this thing to bring that out in other people as well. I could never do anything graphic-wise and wasn't that creative, sort of did things. And that's something that they sort of opened up me a little bit, and feel like I've got a lot better on it. People have different opinions on the quality of my artwork, but
that's good.
Stuff like that is just this. It was a really different environment where you were encouraged to be a bit of an idiot and just sort of try something. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But what's the stupidest way we can present this? What's the most basic form we can present this information? What is the funniest way we can do this? And it sort of opened up that, and it really was just a different style of work, and it was brilliant. And I think that, obviously people know things have changed with Gef now. That became common knowledge on Manx forums, which is always a favourite website of mine. So I think Gef is a bit more serious than it was.
Yeah.
I like to think we haven't lost the ability to sort of not only make fun of other people, but make fun of ourselves.
Yeah, I don't think you've lost that at all.
So I think, while we keep doing that, that's a good thing. I think there has to be a difference in the media over here, because I think there is too much. I think there's almost too much deference paid at times to different groups and different people. I always think the only people I ever use Mr. or Mrs. or anything for is Tynwald. And that was largely because when I first come into Gef, I really wanted to break away from the Howie and Ashy, and I think Dr. Al still gets his, and we still have KLB for Kate Love Brennan. But most of it is Mr. and Mrs. And that was something that I really wanted to do, just to break that period. So at the pandemic stage, we're not at that stage anymore. We have to be a bit more. If we're going to do this, we have to be a little bit more serious in how we term that. But everybody else is just referred to as, Mark, Claire, David, whatever. And I just think sometimes the media has to change a little bit. And I don't think the Manx media has changed brilliantly. I think Free FM are actually one that's caught it brilliantly. Mm-hmm. They do have a really good. Their reach is beyond most of the others, and their team are really good at doing things a little bit different, and also the way they present their things on social media and videos that they do. They were sort of probably where the other media should have been before they did it, in the same way that Gef was well ahead of where the other media should have been. Yeah, and this is what I find funny now, is that you do get this thing of when you speak to people who refer to it as, can we do it a bit Jeffy? And it became a thing when we bought out by the papers and went in there, and it became a thing that people started referring to as, it's a bit Jeffy. And I'm like, I don't know if that's meant to be a good thing or not, but it became like a.
It probably is.
Yeah, it became a way to describe our work, which I quite like.
Yeah. And all this sort of course that you did in sociology and politics, and you started out wanting to do politics. Do you have any sort of strong political views? And
I think I grew up in an age where Tony Blair was sort of the dominant political figure, and I'd so Iraq war aside, which is always staying on that sort of legacy. But that's sort of more where I'm at, is that private enterprise has a social responsibility and should work alongside government to achieve that. I think the state of British politics at the minute is insane.
Yeah.
You will look at what the pound's doing, and I've never really associated myself. I suppose the thing I wanted Corbyn to be Prime Minister because I wanted a Labour government, because I saw it was inevitably better than what was going on with the Conservative Party, but I never, you look at some of the things that went on there, that was just horrendously bad. So definitely more left of centre than anywhere else.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, when you've brought up in the Isle of Man, and things have changed as much as they have.
We had a thing at Gef, actually. We were talking about this term champagne socialists, and we were like, it doesn't really apply to us because we drink prosecco and all this. And then we were doing this thing with we were doing a thing with the creameries, and it just came out as, we're a bit like semi-skim socialists, really. And that's sort of the phrase that we use to describe ourselves, is semi-skim socialists.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's good. Fits.
yeah.
Why not? Why not? Well, so if you don't mind me asking, and I primarily ask this is I ask of everybody in my day job as a financial planner, is, what was your earliest memory of money? I mean, what was money like growing up?
I suppose the stereotypical thing is to say, we're never rich, we're never poor, we didn't go without. And it's true, really. We went on really good holidays as a kid growing up, and when you're a kid, you never really have a value on things, do you? You don't have a value on how many hours your parents have worked for this.
No, but some kids go through life and they don't ever get a job, but you had a job, you worked at McDonald's, so just wondering where that sort of encouragement came from.
I grew up in a household where my dad would quite often start work at 5 o'clock in the morning in Harbour Police, or he'd finish at 10 o'clock at night. During TT, do 12-hour shifts either through the day or through the night. And my mum would work during the day while we were at school, and then somebody would be there to pick. So me and my sister both grew up in a household where both our parents worked really hard in quite sort of different jobs. And when I was a bit older, my mum worked in Woolworths for years when I was a kid. That's probably the first concept I have of money, actually, because I really think of how much Lego cost.
Right.
So it'd be like, little Lego things like £1.50 or £2. So I had a rough idea of how much they were and how many weeks' pocket money I have to save for them.
All right, good.
And then she moved into banking from after that. So that was sort of, again, different. But yeah, we just, until my dad retired, that was the first time that one of men worked. And then my dad's done that typical thing of people who retire who are now busier than they ever were previously.
Oh, yeah.
So, he retired.
I know a few of those.
he retired and threw himself into other stuff that he really wanted to do. So
it's great. You've got to retire to something.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing to see, actually, because it was during the pandemic thing where he didn't really have something to do a lot of the time until different things started picking up on Zoom and meetings were held on that way. And that was an interesting thing to see, just how he was doing with his time. Yeah. His garden was meticulously looked after. So I think that's where it comes from, really. It's just this thing of, I'm somebody who quite happy working more than I am doing anything else.
Yeah.
I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah. Oh, very good. So of all the things you've done through your life so far, what's given you the most fulfillment?
I suppose the thing that sticks out to me really is the Gef election night special that we did, in terms of...
Oh, that was good.
Well, I mean, again, this is all just Emma. She was sort of driving the force behind this. And even like the thing of Gef didn't start the fire, we completely given up on that a month before, and no one really had the heart to tell her, or just forgot to tell her. And then Emma comes in one day and goes, right, so Jack's doing the video, and here it all is. And we're there going, oh, we forgot about that. But no, the whole night in general, it was like, even on, we had the build up to that, we had things that had to get pulled late on, we had guests who hadn't turned up, and it all just sort of still clicked. And it was, again, just down to Emma just completely driving this. But even behind that, we had Kate who was trusting Emma to do it. Emma who had Emma has this thing where she would never be convinced she could do it, but she'd just pull out this amazing thing. And you transformed a staycation place into a TV studio.
Brilliant. And
we were broadcasting this, and it was like somebody went out later on, they went, if you tot up all the number of people that watch that at any point, and then you times that by, we had a guy who worked with EastEnders at a point who was working with us, and he'd sort of said about this is how these things work. It's like about 20,000 you would have hit at some point. At least 20,000 people watched part of that last night. And we're
that's great.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
So no, that would probably be the thing that I'd say I was most happy with. I also did that in my school tie, weirdly. And everyone thinks I did that for a certain joke or something. And to be honest, I was just told to wear a tie.
And is that the only one you've got?
And that was, no, I've got ties, I just couldn't find them. And I saw that and thought, yeah, okay, that'll do. And put it on. And then it just sort of went from there.
That's funny. Great. So for any existing or aspiring business owners or entrepreneurs, I mean, you've been part of Gef, really, was that role. I mean, what would be your number one tip?
Genuinely no idea is insane enough that people won't back it. Because sometimes some of them ideas that are a little bit weird are quite often the best ones. Because, we do live in an age where people want individualism, but they want to fit in as well, which is always kind of weird. But the thing with Gef, where it stepped outside of what was the perceived norms of media on the island and really took on that mantle. And if you look at something like that, that's a brilliant thing. And also people want they want to know who's doing things. They don't want faceless names on and emails on websites. They want to meet people whose work they're seeing and all that sort of thing. So I think that we live in an age where you have to be personable, and you have to really you want people who are spending money with you to know who you are. And that, I think, is more important than most things, especially on an island like this where we have this thing of buy local and shop local and everything like that. And I think people, they're trying to buy into that as much as they are. Obviously, we've got the problem at the minute with the pandemic, not the pandemic, so the cost of living is.
Yeah.
When we had the pandemic where everybody was shopping open, now we've got the cost of living crisis off the back of that.
It's probably got something to do with it, but hey.
Well, yeah. But I think from that is that, you want to know who runs the creamery. Well, Finley's face is on the website. You can ring him up. You want to know what farm your meat comes from. You can do that. And I think that is really important to people.
Right,
so that's sort of where I just think the island business model is very different, obviously, to what you get with multinationals. But I think there's that weird thing of where I'm not going to say the age of Amazon is dying out or something, but people are looking backwards a little bit now in terms of where their things are coming from.
More provenance, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's become more and more important. And I think that people are trying to look more at where they're buying from and who they're buying from. And you see that with connections with people and relationships with people. And I think that will be more important probably in the next few years than it has been for quite a while.
Yeah, probably want to get the cost of a living crisis out of the way there. Yeah, it's amazing how that can influence people. Okay, so what do you do to relax? What do you do to keep your life in balance, Sam? Given that you had that period where you just worked, what did you do instead?
I still kind of do is the problem. I got a lot more into podcasts in the past sort of year or two. So I talk about Kate quite a lot on this, but me and Kate sort of work together pretty much all the time.
Yeah, sure.
One of our things is sending each of the podcasts all the time. So I do listen to really quite bizarre ones at times as well. But I got really into that. I've got like 4 or 5 news ones that I listen to every day as well. So it's like, I used to play on PlayStation. I'm not really, stopped doing that really. Watching sport on TV is probably one of the biggest ones that I do.
What sort of sport?
Mostly football, rugby. Can't watch golf because it puts me to sleep. But really, yeah, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't suppose I have a hobby in a sense. I have like a variety of interests and things that I do. And then we've got the world's least successful pub quiz team, which I'm part of. So
that's claim to fame.
Yeah, well, we do all right on the Christmas ones and New Year's when there's like everyone comes back home from being away and living in the UK and that. And then the rest of the year there's like 3 of us who sort of plod along and we're all convinced that we know what you give someone on like their 27th wedding anniversary. And we've got no idea. But we've all by that point had a couple of jars and they're going, we've got an idea of what this could be. But then at the same time, we're sat there trying to remember songs from like the early 2000s, and we're like, got no idea who this is either.
Yeah, but I bet it's a funnier answer than the real one.
Yeah, but it does have this thing of where, one of our hobbies and ways to relax is absolute mediocrity and getting wound up by each other. So that says probably more about the group of friends I have than anything else.
So tell me, what do you think, apart from the pub quiz team, what's the best things about living in the Isle of Man?
I suppose it comes back to that relationship thing again, is that, you do sort of, you get to know people on a level that you wouldn't do elsewhere, in a variety of different places. Also, there's the thing of just look at the state the UK is in. Yeah, we are realistically.
We are. So, what are the main challenges the Isle of Man faces then? Would you say?
Well, I think immediately the biggest thing is this. The cost of living is mad in terms of what we actually do with it next. But I think also you've got this. I don't know what it is. There's this weird belief about what's going on with the electricity prices, where people are sort of going, "Oh, that's okay. We're all right till next year." We have no idea what March is going to look like. We have no idea what April's going to look like, and we've got a budget in February, which is going to be, I think, probably one of the most consequential Manx budgets you're going to see in a very long time. I know that's going to sound boring to a lot of people, but in terms of how that actually. They need to do something to impact on people's lives. They're talking about getting 100,000 people on the island by 2037. And I think that the problem that the island has settled into is that the government has solved every problem for a very long time. And there has not been enough of a push towards businesses doing things. And I think that they need to, before they start... There's this problem, isn't it? Which
they're all stuck in the planning, aren't they?
Well, yeah. There's a lot gone into that planning application. People should read the report on it. But the actual thing of that is that you obviously need to attract people, but you need to attract businesses that will attract people. So that is a very difficult balance. One of the biggest challenges the island faces is our education system. Now, I know the report past week or two about this around exam results and how that compares to England is problematic because people say, it's apples and oranges. It really isn't. It's more like different types of apples. They're all taking similar exams and all this. I think the island would benefit more from looking at how do we go more into the STEM. So we need to focus more on technology, we need to focus more on science. That's where our future is. We're looking at medicinal cannabis coming to the island, and there's the cultivation for that. The island is an incredibly well-respected place as a regulator, more than perhaps, this thing.
Yeah.
We were speaking to a gentleman who's involved in the Northern Powerhouse in the UK over the government conference. He said about how Jersey and Guernsey's system, they're a very tax-based economy because they're low tax to get people in. Whereas the island's economy is a lot more based on the regulatory side of things and how well respected that is internationally, and that's what draws business in. We need to find a way to harness that to bring people in. That has to be the way forward for the island.
I couldn't agree more.
How we can boost, yes, the financial things and anything else, but the regulatory side of things for the island is just so well respected internationally. That's what we should be going out promoting. And off the back of that, use that sort of people and use these connections to look at the island's education system. I don't think we should focus. Obviously, teachers have to have a role in this, and so do parents and all this. But I think we need to perhaps get a review of the education system from people in companies, industry. Let's get an industry view of the education system. Let's not get educators in to look at how the education system works. Let's get financial industry leaders to look at the education system. So, what do you need in 10 to 15 years? Where are your company's going? And how can the island provide that?
Sounds like a great idea. So when are you going to do that?
Never. Wouldn't stand for keys. This will come back to bite me in a few years. I wouldn't.
No, it's a great idea. That's a really good idea. Well, let's see if anybody picks this up and runs with it. I mean, if you've got any ears of any politicians, and it's best idea I've heard for a little while. But yeah, maybe it's Chamber.
Possibly. I don't know if I'm friends with Chamber. It goes back and forward.
They're great. Okay, so Sam, interesting times. As you mentioned, you alluded that Jeff's been taken over. It's been bought by Isle of Man newspapers, Tyndall. Mm-hmm. So what's a plan for you next? How's that going to pan out? Do you know any idea?
Once I've finished resolving the education problems, I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. I really don't know where we go.
Have you been given freedom to flourish, to coin an awful phrase?
God, I hate that phrase.
Yeah, I do too. Sorry, I used it.
I think we're at a stage still of working each other out a little bit in terms of how this works.
We should know each other quite well, shouldn't you? That's why you left.
You said that. I did not say that. I may have implied it. But no, I don't know, if I'm honest, where this plays out or where it goes next. I don't think there's a lot of people around me who necessarily know where we go next.
Right. Be good if there was a plan.
Yeah. But I was almost a bit surprised that there wasn't more of an idea. And I don't think necessarily we each had the best understanding of each other. And that went both ways in terms of the different beliefs into what was going on. But, it's got to work one way or another.
Yeah. And I guess it's what the aim of what Gef was set up for. And
yeah, but equally I think that there's definitely room to do both things at the same time. I think that, we do live... I managed to avoid mentioning this up until now. We do live at a point where you have a media company in little quotes in a sense, of Manx Radio, which does get a good amount of money off the public every year to do what it does. Don't get me wrong, a lot of that stuff they should be getting paid for, but in terms of what the rest of the industry can provide to the public, that's a difficult path to tread because you do have an imbalance in marketing, you have an imbalance in resources, and what is available to private companies. And I think that means that there has to be a greater synergy between other companies in terms of how this plays out. And this is Gef, the newspapers, we're going to have to learn to get on and play well.
Yeah.
Right, nice for each other, because realistically, again, we are going in. People don't like to mention it, and Dr. Allenson seems to have this thing where you can talk yourself into a recession. I think we're probably already quietly in a recession, and we're definitely heading into one. And in terms of how businesses work, we're going to have to work together on this, because otherwise there will be businesses that do not survive the next year. And I don't think in any way that the papers and Gef will be one of them sort of thing, but I just think that we have to be maybe a bit smarter in how we work with each other and work with other companies.
Yeah. Just moving on to the final few questions. So any books you've read recently that would be a good source of inspiration for our listeners?
The last book I read was A Year in Trumpland. No, A Year at the Circus, which John Sopel's book about working in the White House is North American editor for BBC, and it's just absolutely insane. Because it's sort of like a real... I suppose it is a little bit of a...
See, it was when Trump was there, right?
Yeah. And it's a little bit of a journalist book for journalists almost. Like, this is what it was like. You've got no idea. Whatever you've been doing for the past year and a half, covering your local people, this is nothing compared to what I've been watching.
Yeah, I read Michael Lewis, Fifth Risk. Similar sort of vein, actually.
And I think that was probably the last one. I got into audiobooks a little bit as a thing, so I don't really count them as reading, weirdly. But the last audiobook I listened to was Jeremy Clarkson, A Year on the Farm, so it's sort of like... Oh,
that's good, yeah.
Best TV series in years.
Oh, isn't it brilliant? I love the way it's really helpful for agriculture, for the public to understand what it's about.
Well, he arguably did in 6 hours what Countryfell's been trying to do for 30 years. And I like Countryfell as well, but, it's just... Yeah. But no, I think that actually, because I thought the weird thing with John Sobel's book was that it did have this sort of moment of capturing that in our job, you are never the story. You're the person who's writing it. And that is the point of it. So whatever's going on around you, you have to sort of stay at a fixed point and say, right, this is what we are. And part of that was how the norms have moved, how Trump moved the norms in American society. And I think part of that what I got from that is taking out your own belief about where something is and having to say this is what it is now, which doesn't perhaps make a lot of sense, but we all start off things with our own ideas about how things are and what things are. And I think a lot of that was you broke down the norms so much in a country, but yet how does that get to the point where they were then? And his point, I suppose, through the book is that, this was a completely different presidency, but in reality, it actually wasn't. So if you take away the headlines and look at what's going on underneath it, that's what actually, not a lot of what Trump did was actually that different to what a lot of people have done. And that's sort of the lesson I think I got from that more than anything is that, you see all these mad headlines, but underneath that, what has actually changed? And in truth, not a massive amount. It's basically what America's been doing back and forth with itself for 50 years. And glean from that what you will, I guess.
No, it's interesting. It is. So who inspires you, Sam?
Oh, Rory Bremner, why not?
Yeah, he's inspiring.
Don't know why I said Rory Bremner. Let's go for a reason. I've said that because I was listening to a podcast with him and Ian Dale on the way out here, which was not a good idea because it's basically about an hour of him doing voices while interviewing himself almost.
He's very good at it, though.
Well, yeah. I know, there we go. Very inspiring because in one sense he's taken a skill that he's got, turned it into something very successful. And I think that's something we should all really look at, Like I say, when I first started writing, my writing was terrible. I'd like to think it's got slightly better.
It's very good.
So in one sense, I think we can say that. He's found a niche. Find your own niche. There we go.
Very good. So what's your favourite quote? I loved what it said on your LinkedIn. Yeah, I'll read this whilst you think of what it really is. It said, I write things for my own amusement and the enjoyment of strangers. I thought that was great. So what's your favourite quote?
I was going to say my Instagram's even worse because I only set this up to continue following TV stars of cancelled shows in the 90s. My favourite quote, Abraham Lincoln once said, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
I'm sure he did. Yeah. Do you listen to the news quiz on Radio 4?
I do occasionally. So I used to download it when it come through the podcast thing, but now you have to go to BBC Sounds and download it from there. And I found that too inconvenient.
Oh, right.
So I listen to it far less than I used to. But I listen to Mark Steele in Town. That's quite good.
He's very good. Yeah, I enjoy him. Okay, so where can people go to learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Don't learn about me, learn about the work I do. So we've got the website, obviously got Gef.im, we've got Facebook, Gef The Mongoose, and we're on Instagram and Twitter, Gef Mongoose IOM. We were going to get TikTok, but I couldn't learn how to floss, or whatever it is. I don't know, I can't. I need to find a younger person to explain all this to me. But
don't worry yourself, you'll be fine. Well, thank you so much, Sam. I mean, it's been fascinating and a real pleasure to meet you today and talk to you all about this. And your life so far, very inspiring. So thank you.